Well, welcome back to another episode of The Curious CEO. Now, today, I'm not trying to freak anybody out, but I think in today's world, we all need to be prepared. We need to have our eyes and ears open because cybercrime just doesn't apply to businesses. It applies to ourselves as individuals and our households, and it also applies to our elderly parents and grandparents and kids. But the good news is, today, I've got a cyber cop joining me. Joining me today is Greg Scasny from BlueShift Technologies, who's the CTO. Greg, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we're going to dig in here today. Now, I'm not your usual audience. I know that you're used to working with NASA. You've worked with, law enforcement. You even have helped the IRS and a bunch of other things that I know you can't even talk about.
Very true.
Today, you're talking to an Irishman. So we're going to dumb this down a little bit so that I can really understand. And I know this is a big topic because I did some research last night on AI. And even though I've done the research, I'm like, I need to verify this with Greg. But I saw some numbers that were kind of amazing. That last year, that $10.5 trillion was victim to cybercrime last year. For individuals, it's billions of dollars as well. So, first of all, before we get into that, how did you get into this business?
I've always been kind of interested in security. So years ago, I had an MSP business in Indiana, and I started getting into the security part of that very early on. But we would provide IT services for small and medium businesses, so that's a pretty popular business now. People wouldn't spend money specifically on security back in the, 2000s, early 2000s when we started. Security wasn't a separate discipline as it was from IT. You had an IT guy, he did everything, and that's just the way that it was. But I was always interested in the security part of it, and I started doing the security parts of that business, configuring firewalls and VPNs and learning, about exploits and how to hack things. And it was very, very interesting to me. And I just kind of kept down that path. And as I exited that business, I decided to start just a pure security business. I saw a gentleman at a conference. His name's Dave Kennedy. Hacking Dave he's a great guy for the InfoSec community. Really inspired me many, many years ago to really dig deep and get into security. And so that's what I did. I started a few companies doing that, and it kind of led me down the path to where I am now. But it's really just a curiosity and a desire to keep learning about technology and those sorts of things. And from a security perspective, you can get as technical as you want. Now, I'm very, very technical. I have a degree in electrical engineering. I have a minor in mathematics. I went to Purdue, been employed as an engineer and doing all kinds of craziness, but I've always been a really, really technical guy. So from a security standpoint, you can get really down in the weeds and be very, very technical. But the problem that we have in security, what really drew me to it is I was blessed with the gift of gab. I'm just going to be honest. And you'll notice this as we go through. I've never been accused of not being verbose. And so I have the ability to explain things that are very, very technical to non-technical people, and I enjoy that a lot. So besides being able to do things like exploits and do red teaming and penetration testing, which is what they call the adversarial side of cyber, I also got to teach that to people and teach what it means and why you should be concerned and what you need to do to defend yourself. And it just keeps going. It never stops. Technology just keeps going. And it's just, if you enjoy being technical and you enjoy being a lifelong learner, it's a great field to be in.
Yeah, well, it's not slowing down, is it?
Never. There's always something new.
Well, I'm so curious about it because, and again, at the end of the day, I don't think I ran a good sized company. We had tens of thousands of members. We were in 45 countries. We had 200 employees in 21 states. And it was always, our IT guys were like, we need you on that wall. You must be on that wall. But at the same time I was always kind of on edge because I'm like, are we doing enough? So the three things that I'm really interested in getting into today are, number one, a lot of folks who are tuned in here, and I know these are the people that you serve. These are small business owners who are in different industries, and this is not their world. And you guys at BlueShift Technologies, that's your speciality, is protecting them. But I'd love to know I'd love to dig into that group a little bit. Then I'd love to know some of your personal advice, like what can we do to protect ourselves? What do you do? And then how do we protect our kids and our elderly members? So
one of the things that I always tell small business owners, and there's a kind of a disconnect between what larger corporate America understands for security and what they're doing now. Like they have what they call CISO roles, so Chief Information Security Officer roles. They have board members that are cybersecurity experts. They understand that cyber has to be built into their businesses, and small businesses aren't there yet because it's expensive or can be expensive. And what they think is they say, well, I have an IT guy, right? So I either have an MSP like I had a company I had, or I have an in-house IT guy, and that's his job. That's what he's going to worry about. And this is why we have the problem that we do is small business owners who are not in a technology type business don't understand that the skills needed to be a really good IT guy are very, very different than the skills needed to be a really good security guy. And I tell this all the time, like, so if you put me in front of an environment like what they call an Active Directory environment, where I won't get in the technical piece of it, but I don't know how to configure that for a business. No idea. But if you sit me in front of environments there, I will break into it. I'll steal information. I'll do all the bad things you need to do, because my discipline is very, very different. My goals are different from a security perspective than what an IT person's goal is. An IT person's goal is to keep your business running and use technology to make money. My goal is to keep you safe while you do that. And sometimes those goals are not aligned.
They're different animals, right?
Right. And so the business owner is always going to probably make, especially a small business owner, is going to always make that decision is I need my business to go. And then they forego some of the more difficult security measures that need to be in place. And adversaries know this, and they exploit those every day, which is why you see this on the news, and you notice the cost of it. A data breach to happen at a small business can be devastating. The cost to remediate, if you don't have good systems in place, can be in the millions of dollars. There's not a lot of small businesses who can afford that kind of hit. And that's not just in raw costs, which can be very expensive in raw costs, but it's brand damage, it's downtime, it's all the things that go along with that data breach. So they can be very detrimental to your business. So what small business owners need to understand is they should get with the security professional. They should have assessments done. They should pick what we call a control framework. I'll get into some of that later, but understand their security posture of their business. And if they don't know what those things mean, by all means, call someone, call us, call somebody that is a security professional, and have them do some kind of assessment of your company, because they'll be able to tell you where the gaps are, right? And so you can put the right technologies in place and the right processes.
What are some of the typical ways that these guys wiggle their way into a business?
It is literally infinite, but usually it comes down to, and it's still true today, is social engineering, right? So sending somebody an email or a text or something like that to impersonate someone's identity, someone that you trust, and people are busy and they don't pay attention and they end up clicking on something, and it just happened. Like, I was sent a phishing email from a customer the other day, or actually was a past customer. They sold their company. Someone had gotten into their email and they're sending out other phishing emails, right? So they're coming from this trusted source. And then you end up clicking on that, you end up giving them credentials. And so that just starts this chain of events that happen. So either, I can phish you and steal your identity, which means I can get into the systems that you have. And now I can impersonate you to then continue that chain. I can exploit your system and get on your system. There's such a broad options available to an adversary once they've got into there to do that. But that's usually what happens for most people. It's a social engineering. Humans are the fallible piece of the equation there, and they're always going to be.
Somebody opens the door, basically, right? If somebody clicks on something. We had it at the company where we were maniacal, and our IT guys were doing the best they could. But even with all the training we did, I'd get an email, somebody get an email from me saying, to the CFO, hi, Melissa, this is Dermot here. I need you to deposit $40,000 into my account today. Can you take care of that, please?
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
And those are getting easier to spot. But what happens is, when you get people who are more like, you'll have those generic phishing emails like that, where they can do a little bit of research on your company or use AI to do research on your company, find out who your executives are and try to impersonate you. And those are pretty easy to automate things. But you get people who are more serious about adversarial techniques. So someone who's going to target a specific company, which does happen even to small businesses. They can be targeted depending on what you do and what vertical you're in for your small business. Those get much, much more difficult because these guys can get very devious, very maniacal in what they're trying to do social engineering. And it can not just come from emails. It could be phone calls. It could be reaching out to your family members. They do things that are just absolutely horrible, which is why I'm in the defensive cyber business, because we want to stop them from doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I was at a conference a couple of years ago and they had an FBI guy come in and talk to us, a group of CEOs. And they said, look, these aren't just a group of gangs and, hackers online. You now have countries. And at the time, not to pick on any country, but they said, North Korea, Iran, China, and Ukraine.
Yeah, 100% true.
Yeah. So we're up against. So this is endorsed by countries even.
Well, think about why. There's no other criminal enterprise you can get into that has such a high return for such a low risk, right? So if you're in another country and you're performing cyber crimes against the U.S., these are companies that don't have extradition to the U.S., right? So yeah, we catch you and we find out what you're going to do. So they close up their infrastructure, they build new infrastructure, get a different hacker, and go somewhere else. Again, with the assistance of AI now, they can throw out so many different attacks, right? So, and it's such a broad net. If they get just a fraction of them to hit, it's a very, very profitable day. There's nothing else you can do that. There's no other criminal enterprise where the risk is so small and again, and the rewards are so big, which is why the problem continues to stay. It pays very, very well. And the actual risk, you're going to see every once in a while someone gets caught here and there. But even those can be played up a little bit, I think, in what happens. So.
And obviously, this is what you guys do for a living. You protect businesses, right? You're monitoring the whole time. You're able to decode whether this is a real threat. Is this a kind of a major or a minor? And your thing is all response time.
Yes.
Let's say, because you're an entrepreneurial guy, like you're not just a propeller head, right? You're not just a tech guy. You're an entrepreneur. So let's say you were starting a business, or you had a business, or you're about to start a business. Just from a very basic standpoint, what would you put in place just to make sure you have something in place or that you're educating your team? Like what are some simple things we can do?
So the best advice I can give to that, because it's different for every company. Now, there are some basics you need to do. Like you should have an EDR antivirus on your systems. You should use two-factor authentication across everything you do, and enforce that on your users. Even the CEO and the people who refuse to use it, you make them use those sorts of things. But what you really should do is we call pick a control framework, right? So there's all these control frameworks out there. Some of them are very, very detailed, something like what we call like a NIST 853, which is a very detailed framework of controls that you should meet. No small business is going to ever comply with NIST 853. But there are other control frameworks out there that NIST provides, one called the CyberSecurity framework. It's called the NIST CFS. It's a grouping of things that you can do in your company. It specifies what these controls are. And if you can meet most of those, you're putting yourself on the path. The compliance isn't security, but you're at least putting yourself on the path to be more secure and understanding where your gaps are at. It's not a light undertaking, but it is absolutely necessary in today's cyber world to do something like that. Mm-hmm. The worst thing you could do is try to shoot from the hip, right? And that's why, again, I'm not a huge fan of these massive compliance frameworks that, if we have to check these boxes and it doesn't matter, they have that control, you just have to meet it. Doesn't matter if it's more secure for your business or not, right? So you need to take those controls and make sure they're actually being effective from a security standpoint in your business. But you got to start somewhere. That's the biggest thing I can tell people. And so if you pick something like that, that, especially if you pick something like that, and I'm just using the NIST CSF as an example. Because there's other ones. There's like the CIS controls is another one they have out there. But some of those types of frameworks, they're more attainable for small businesses. And again, it puts you on a path to understanding that you're at least following best practices. It'll probably give you a better rate on cyber insurance. And then you can move your business and accept the type of risk that you're willing to accept in that business, right? So that's the best way for me to go about it, because there's no one technological solution that is going to fit the bill. Now, with that said, I'm a big proponent of the types of solution that we offer. I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch, but you really, from and what we offer is relatively inexpensive, but it's a way to be able to have visibility into everything in your environment, whether you're looking at your cloud environments, your endpoints, if you have an office and your network and those sorts of things. Getting that visibility is very, very important, because if you don't know what normal is in your environment, how do you know when something's abnormal? And you only know what normal is if you collect data. Right, so that's just a mathematical equation, right? This is what's normalized, and something outside of that is not normal. You need that, and it doesn't matter what size business. And we're a cybersecurity company. We use our own tools, right? So we use our own platform to protect our business. But we're relatively a small team. But it's a very, very effective. I know what's going on in my environment, even though I have hundreds of servers across many different cloud platforms, different identities, all this stuff. But we know exactly what's going on at any time. And you really need that. That's what you need nowadays. And if you don't, something's going to fall through the cracks. And then you're playing catch up. Playing catch up is, unfortunately, in the cyber world, is very expensive.
My summary in that is you can't put your head in the sand. Like if you're a business owner, you've got to be you've got to research, you got to figure it out, you got to ask questions. And obviously, you guys are a great resource, and we're going to add your information in there so people can find out about you. But is there any simple way, like, is there a cybersecurity for dummies book? Is there a website you can go to?
I really wish there were, and I have a good story about that. So I met a gentleman the other day. I sold a camper. I had a camper, neither here nor there. But he asked me what I did, and I told him I did cybersecurity. And he's like, "Oh, something I've always liked. I'm really interested in doing cyber." I said, "Oh, that's great. Do you have an IT background?" "No, I don't." "You have a math background?" "No, I don't." Well, cyber sounds very, very sexy sometimes, but it is when you talk about levels of technical understanding. You have help desk guys here, and then you have like network engineers and all this, and cyber is kind of way up here. You really have to have a very broad understanding of a lot of technical things that happen, anything from, simple networking all the way up to, how the internet works, and then understanding cloud platforms and identities and all this stuff that's very, very technical. It's very difficult for a small business owner to try to get. You really need to consult a professional, a security professional. It is 100% a different language, and it's changing daily. Right. So we always have this cat and mouse game of, we come out with this new defensive technology, and then attackers go, "Oh, you have that? Well, we'll find a way around this way." And it's going to be that way until the end of time, because it's the game of cops and robbers.
It's the good guys against the bad guys.
Into infinity, right? So you have something of value, the bad guys are going to try to find a way around it. Fortunately and unfortunately, now we have AI. It lowers the technical barriers to doing offensive security, or from doing bad guy stuff, right? So from being a cyber adversary, the guys that write malware are very technically apt. These are, like you said, these are not people. It could be people in their basements. Most times not. These are well-funded. These malware is written, it's extremely complex. Well, you look at it from a pure programming perspective, it's beautiful stuff, even though it's very malicious. But it's not something that is easily written, but that barrier is starting to come down. So the cost of getting that technical expertise with AI now is coming down, which means it's going to lead to more attacks. Now, fortunately, defensive guys like us, we use AI too. So we can utilize the same tools that the bad guys are using to help them now defend against that sort of thing. And that's where it's heading. That's where the whole market is heading.
It's not going to slow down any time. I don't see that number. Obviously, you guys are going to be doing your best to reduce that, but it's a business, as you said, for the bad guys as much as it is for the good guys, right? They're probably making more money out of it than the good guys.
They are. If I didn't have a conscience, I could definitely make a whole lot more money than what I'm making now.
Let me ask you this on a more practical level, because you and I had talked a little bit about this. A couple of years ago, we had a client of ours. They got a text that looked like it was from one of us. And it was like, "Hey, I see you on here. It's so great." And this person, "Oh my gosh, can't believe you replied to me. Yeah, things are great." And then the next text was allegedly from us saying, "Hey, I got this investment opportunity in real estate. I'm only opening up to about 100 people. As you know, we are very connected in the real estate space." And unfortunately, this lady transferred $75,000 over to somebody we don't know. I think it was on Instagram. That was unfortunately her kids' college funds.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly sad. It broke my heart. And there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. And unfortunately, it's not just the money, it's the violation that the person actually felt. So a lot of people are on social media, and this is where, like, we're all on there. We have our own data. This morning, we had paid off a loan here during the week. It was a good size number, but we paid it off in full. And I'm getting all this stuff right now. And because I'm getting ready to talk to you, I'm so paranoid. Do I respond to this? Do I not respond to it? But like, we have a lot of folks, and how do we protect ourselves, whether it's on Instagram, on social media? Like, what do you do?
One of the things that people really need to do is they kind of need to use the sniff test, right? If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? So, when it comes to especially things like money, transferring money, giving money to somebody, you need to verify, and you need to verify from what I call known sources, right? So I'll give you a really good story about this with my neighbor. My neighbor down here is really good friends of mine. He's wealthy, sold the electrical business. He calls me one day and he asked me if I have $1,000. I said, "Yeah," I won't use his name. But what do you need it for? I mean, I'd do anything for him. He's like, "Well, my wife just got a call. They're from Maryland, and she missed a court date, they saying, in Maryland, and the county sheriff is going to come arrest her if she doesn't go meet him and give him $1,000. And right away, I know this is a scam. I know this is a scam, right? but they don't see it. They're panicking. She thinks she's going to jail. So I walk from a neighbor's house. I grab the phone from her and I tell them, I use expletives, come effing get me. Send them here. I'll wait for you to send the sheriff's office. I had her hang up and I had her actually call our county sheriff's office because I knew that she's freaking out because she thinks they're coming to get her. And I know they're not, right? But she's crying. She's hysterical. But we find the Lee County Sheriff's number. We call the sheriff's department. They said, we're never sending somebody out to get money from you. That's 100% a scam. So it's that authoritative source that you need to contact, right? And say, yeah, okay, you may be wanting me to do something. I'm not going to just trust you online. I'm not going to trust the guy or the gal that called me. I'm going to reach out to a number or someone that I know, and I'm going to authoritatively validate what is happening, right? So that takes sometimes, again, when you're in a situation like that where they think they're getting arrested, that's what they play on. They play on that panic. They play on this need for urgency. And you'll see that in just about every scam. Authority and a need for urgency. You have to do this now right? Well, whether it's the IRS or anything to do with the government or the police, there's never a harm in taking a step back, right? And taking a little bit more time. It's never, ever going to be that urgent, but they play on people. They play on their emotions, and that's why it works.
And never call the number that they email you, never call
Ever.
the number that they tell you, look it up independently. And I think this is where it's like a sense of healthy paranoia, as
Yes.
you say, verify everything. You're better off to let the sheriff office come and get you than act on what you're being asked to do. Now, let me ask you this, because I've heard, and again, this is maybe fact or fiction, right? It's like, now I've heard that AI can actually capture somebody's voicemail, take their voice, and so somebody could take Dermot Buffini and create a conversation with Greg saying, hey, Greg, it's Dermot here. I'm just want to reach out to you. I'm actually in a bit of a bother. I'm going to Ireland next week and I'm a bit short. Is there any chance you could Venmo a few bucks to my Venmo account? Is that actually taking place?
Absolutely. It is. And it's actually for guys like you and actually guys like me, people who have their voices online. I've done lots of podcasts and interviews, and you do them for a living, much easier. I can take samples of your audio from your podcast and feed it to an AI engine, and I can have you say whatever you want. And since you have video, I could probably get it to the video to match your voice to do that. That's how AI works. And so that's, I mean, my 12-year-old could probably do that.
Well, can people do that on Facebook too? I mean, everybody's on Facebook. People are posting, can somebody
they can
go on
post
and
those
say,
videos. If you call and say, I need you to Venmo me money, the first thing I do is I have your cell phone number. I call you. And the funny thing is, and this was legitimate, this happened to another neighbor of mine. I'm very close to all my neighbors here. I live on a barrier island, so we're all very close. I mean, this neighbor of mine is a very works for a very high-powered injury attorney law firm. So he's an attorney. He's not a dummy. And he had a guy he hadn't heard from said, "Hey, I'm stuck. I need $1,000 or whatever it was." I'm like, "That's a scam." And so he actually called him up and we got his number. And sure enough, it was legit, and it ended up getting paid back. But you have to have that healthy skepticism.
Yeah,
if you don't,
it's
it's a recipe for disaster, unfortunately.
I'm hearing families now are having a code word, like a safe word or something that.
That happened. So years ago when we all worked in offices before COVID, me and my business partner shared an office. We were getting phished all the time, and they would always try to use our names. So we always had a weekly code word between us. So if he was going to send me a link in an email they wanted me to click on, he had to send the code word along with it. So I knew it was legit, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, those sorts of things, as long as you keep those things secret and having those type of protocols.
Yeah. So just awareness. Be aware.
Yeah, well, again, never trust, always verify. Be aware. That's for on the individual side. Obviously, in the business side, you need to put a little more effort into the technology side of things. But
and again, I think what I'm hearing as well is like there's no need to panic, but there is a reason to get educated. There's a reason. Like you're a coach. I mean, essentially, that's what your company is. You're a coaching company for businesses that says when it comes to this issue, we're able to solve the problem, and we're going to walk you through how to do that.
The biggest realization I try to get our customers to understand is there's nothing they can do to stop someone from breaking into their stuff. It's going to happen. I'm just going to be flat out honest. If you have a determined adversary wanting to get into your infrastructure, and they spend enough time, they spend enough money, it's going to happen. So you have to kind of give that up. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't make yourself a hard target, do all the preventative things you need to do, but realize at some point, maybe through no fault of your own, something's going to happen. you need to be prepared for that eventuality. And the more you're prepared for that eventuality, the less it's going to cost you when it happens. If you, like you said earlier, if you put your head in the sand and say, I'm too small, it's not going to happen to me, blah, 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 baloney, it's going to happen to you. And when it does, that's when you have to write the big checks, right? So if you don't want to write the big checks, you need to prepare yourself for that eventuality and then run that plan when it does happen, right? And so then and if you have technology like ours, it makes that much, much easier.
Yeah,
so
it's prevention. Prevention.
Well, it's prevention, and it's prevention, and it's also response, right? So the bad thing has happened. How do I respond to that, and how do I do that as effectively, both time-wise and cost-wise as possible?
Well, you live in a place where it's beautiful. You're off the coast of Florida. You're on an island. You get tornadoes, but you guys seem
hurricanes.
You get hurricanes. So you're like, hey, this is the cost of us living here, right? It's not that it can happen, but there's a possibility.
Well, I lost my house to Hurricane Ian in 2022. But I didn't get injured, right? I didn't lose my family. Why? Because we had a plan. Just like you live in a place like this, there's inherent risk to that. So you plan for that risk, and we executed our plan, and we came back and we're rebuilding. But cyber is no difference, right? So just like people who live in the coast have hurricane plans, you need to have a plan for your cyber. And if you don't, then it's not going to be good, unfortunately.
No, it's a cost of doing business. It's a cost of living. We have it here in California. Like, our fire insurance goes through the roof, and it's like, well, maybe you don't need it until you need it, and then you're in trouble, and rebuilding.
But you have
California,
a plan. Like, you have a plan. If you live in a fire-prone area, which is really scary, way scarier than hurricanes, you have a plan, right? You have a plan for when it gets to be fire season and what you're going to do. And you should have that plan in your business, especially if you're a small business, because having things like cyber insurance are great if you need to use it. But if you need to use it, then it becomes this, I have to be able to prove that I did, the best practice things in my industry to defend myself. If you didn't, you're going to have a hard time getting that policy to pay. Larger businesses, sometimes they can afford those losses. I mean, when the casino, I remember the exact casino, when they got hit, they just absorbed, they paid the ransom, just said, okay, it's cost of doing business and we're going, it was tens of millions of dollars. Well, small businesses don't have that luxury. So
totally. And I think I might have heard you say this, but it's in the average, I think claim is about breach is about $4 million.
The average breach, the cost to remediate a breach in the United States is about $4 million. And that's just because that's the total kind of end-to-end cost. So that's both, incident response costs and forensic cost. It's, downtime, it's the brand damage. It's all the things that happen from there, loss of business, those sorts of things.
Well, I'm curious about the last section here, but I presume it's a version of what we've talked about. But, my dad was 90, he's 94. He's living in Ireland. My mom and him at the time, they were living at home. They were doing great. And one day he gets a call from a guy telling him he needs his debit card and the whole lot. And he got suckered. And it wasn't huge money, thank God. But it was a couple of $100, and he didn't think to pick up the phone. And we had to do everything after the fact, thank God. But I know the two groups that I'm most concerned about are the elderly and the young. My brother-in-law, he's talking about some of the platform that these kids are on, which is a massive platform. And he's like, if you've got a kid, I would not have them on that. Now, again, I'm going to tell you why, and I don't want a lawsuit here, but at the end of the day, it's facts. And he's like, you know what? These kids are being brought in and lured into a fun, playful environment. And then, all sorts of, grooming and like scary stuff is happening. How do you protect your kids? How do we protect our kids and the elderly?
I have a 12-year-old, me being in the business, watching how these things happen. I was like, well, this is not a good platform for you to be on, especially if you had kids. You have to be diligent about what they're doing. Now, listen, I'm a technology guy. So my kid, he built his own gaming PC, he has a phone, and he's only 12. But we watch what he do and we have conversations with him to tell him why doing certain things online is dangerous, why sometimes using your real name is dangerous, why you need to do things, why you need to not talk to strangers and what to look out for. But you really have to have those conversations with them. Maybe the kids, if they're younger than 12 and 10 and those sorts of things, you just really got to watch what they're doing. There's tons of parental control apps you can get, those sorts of things, but it's really being involved. And I'm not trying to give parental advice, but you really got to be involved with what they're doing and watching what they're doing in those sorts of things. To protect them, and again, being just brutally honest with them about the consequences of not, because it can be bad. And the same thing with the elderly is a very tough problem. I don't want to cast a wide net, but I mean, a lot of them aren't technologically savvy. They've worked all their life. They've accumulated some wealth. They tend to be helpful, and unfortunately, the bad guys prey on that. It still comes down to an education thing. So unfortunately, my grandparents have all passed, but my dad's in his 70s. My mom is in her 70s as well. And so I tell them all the time, if you have questions about anything, let me know. This is, you try to get someone out there that's trusted. Not everybody has someone like me to get to, but that it just really comes down to education. And that's the hard part against the elderly people. There's no magic cyber bullet. I really wish there was. There's no blinky box you can put in. There's no magical piece of software. And that's just unfortunate. And we really have to work towards that education piece.
And I think what you're saying is everybody can do, right? Like you can go talk to mom and dad if they're elderly and living by themselves. Say, listen, here's the landscape. Here's what you need to do. You call me. You don't. Because I think even the older generation had more of a reverence towards authority. If the priest or the copper or the teacher said something, like they're like, hey, I got to do this right now. But it sounds like everybody can have that conversation. And it also, I talked to somebody the other day as a financial wealth manager. They had a client who's like literally trying to liquidate some of their assets because such and such wants money. And they're like, this is a scam. Or at least let us get in touch with you. Let's do this, serve you with this and evaluate this, right? But it sounds like it involves a conversation with your kids. It involves a conversation with your folks or people in your community, and just say, look, I'm not trying to scare you, but the best defense is attack, and to attack the problem and awareness.
And that's 100%, especially with that specific demographic, because again, they're most of them don't have, may have a computer or a tablet, but they're not the ones that are on Facebook all the time doing this stuff. So it's usually the texting type scams or an email scam, that they're getting involved with, and some of them don't have anybody, and that's the unfortunate part. They may be just them and their spouse, or them and someone else who's elderly, and they just don't have anybody that's technically savvy enough to tell them that this is what they shouldn't do. And that's I wish I had all the answers, but sometimes those are tough problems.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, there's nobody who doesn't understand that there's people trying to break into homes. There's there's people trying to do all sorts of goofy stuff, and at the end of the day, I think it translates. It's just I think when it comes to your world, it can be so intimidating. It's so overwhelming, but I'm sure the principles are still the same.
It is, and it changes very, very fast. And you just hit something on the head that I try to get across, even with what we do, is that while the methods may change of how people are getting in and doing things, the effect of what happens, what you should be looking for in your environments, almost stays the same, right? So everybody's always trying to chase the new, fanciest thing. And sometimes you just got to take that step back and go, okay, what's the best way I can protect my organization, protect myself, without having to jump over the cliff of like, I just got to have everything, So
yeah, no, for sure. And I'm sure with the advent of AI, it's just getting faster. Like
AI is a very wonderful tool, is the best way I can put that. Now, is it going to take over the world? I don't think so, but it's a tool nonetheless. It's no different than when I went to engineering school, they had me a slide rule. I don't have a slide rule. When I started doing, advanced math, and this is a slide rule, you're never going to need to use, here's a TI-89 calculator. This is what you're going to do things on. People were like, well, calculators, this, that, and the other, whatever. But it's a tool that I didn't have to, I can now, as a human, I can do more things. And AI is really, it makes us more effective at our jobs, but it makes adversaries more effective too. So there is this race, but it is a very unique tool. I'm excited to see where it's going. It's so fun to mess around with and be able to put real uses behind it. Like we use AI to detect threats and do all kinds of unique stuff, to gather information and give us reports that are on a fly. Things that would take my analyst hours to do now can happen in minutes. And it makes it so much better for us, and now it makes it better for our customers. But it's going to be interesting coming here in the future. But it's a must for cyber.
Well, first of all, I want to really thank you for taking the time today to just kind of walk through this and to explain in a very simplistic way. But here's what I'm taking away is, number one is, we can't put our head in the sand. It's better to be proactive about it. It's better to get an education, and then ultimately have conversations that, we can have in very simplistic ways, whether it's inside of our business, whether it's inside of our families, whether it's with our friends and communities. And I'm super thankful that BlueShift Technologies is out there working every day to kind of keep the bad guys away, and that there's folks like you who are you're leading the charge on that. So
thank you for having me on. I love to talk about this stuff and love to be as helpful as I can.
Well, you have certainly been that, and we'll put in a little link here how people can get in touch with you guys, and we just really appreciate it. So I have a feeling this won't be the last time we talk. So
I'm happy to do it anytime.
Thanks for making it so simple and fun.